famous Swedish warship survived a lot longer underwater than it sailed on top of it. And now efforts are being made once again to save the Vasa. Her maiden and only voyage was in 1628. The Vasa carried dozens of cannons on 2 gun decks, and there was too much weight on top of a keel that was too small. Less than a mile after she first set sail, a wind gust blew her onto her side. Water rushed in the gun ports, and she sank with the crowd watching. The muddy waters of the Baltic Sea preserved the Vasa fantastically until 1961, when workers were able to raise the ship. Since then, the beautiful structure with 98% of its original parts intact has regaled tens of millions of visitors to its museum in the Swedish capital. But the Vasa is sinking again, so to speak. The wood has contracted, gravity is causing her to tilt, so Sweden is sinking $19 million into a restoration project that will support the Vasa with steel cradles and a steel skeleton. If that works, she should be in ship shape for display once again in 2028. Fridays are awesome. I'm Carl Azus. This is the world from A to Z. In Washington, D.C., the debate rolls on about whether the United States should continue observing time changes. A U.S. Senate committee heard arguments on this very subject Thursday. Previous polls have shown that most Americans are tired of springing forward to daylight saving time, which we're on now, and falling back to standard time, where we spend the winter months. The hang-up, as has been the case for years, is which civil time to keep. One proposal that lawmakers and advocates discussed yesterday was to choose daylight saving time as America's year-round civil time, but let states opt out of it if they want to. The problem with that is, if several states do it, it could cause a lot of confusion and problems with interstate schedules. Right now, only Arizona and Hawaii don't observe time changes. They're on standard time year-round. One other thing. The U.S. tried eliminating time changes before in the early 1970s. It made daylight saving time permanent. That quickly became unpopular because it was so dark on winter mornings when people were going to school and work. So the time changes resumed, and it's been hard to reach consensus on which one to go with. Next, the U.S. stock market continues to swing wildly in response to the Trump administration's moves on tariffs. Following the big bounce-back stocks made on Wednesday, they dropped again Thursday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average losing more than 1,000 points. One positive economic sign was that the inflation rate from last March to this March was 2.4%. That's a smaller increase in prices than the country's seen in months. And consumer spending continues to benefit the economy.
Easter spending is expected to soar this year despite a lot of economic uncertainty. The National Retail Federation estimates consumers will shell out more than $23 billion this year, with people spending around $189 per person on average. That's up $12 from last year. Catherine Cullen from the National Retail Federation says even though some items are more expensive due to inflation, it's not holding people back from shopping.
Through all of these tumultuous times, consumers have been very protective of these holidays.
According to the NRF's recent survey, consumers will spend the most on candy and food. Nothing says Easter like an extravaganza.
Easter is our highest consumption period of the entire year.
Emily Metz with the American Egg Board says Americans are expected to eat or decorate 3 billion eggs this spring season. The good news is egg prices have come down in the last few weeks, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Metz says fewer avian flu cases have helped stabilize prices, but they're still much higher than this time last year.
That has made a significant impact. It's allowing our system to recover.
So how can shoppers save this holiday?
Certainly think about which decorations you can reuse from last year, whether or not you can encourage people to participate in a potluck.
Colin also recommends painting wooden eggs instead of real ones. I'm Jen Sullivan.
On this date in world history, one of the world's most famous emperors and military commanders gave up his throne on this date in 1814. Napoleon Bonaparte had declared himself emperor over France in 1804. His goal was to ultimately unify Europe under his rule, but over time, several other countries in the region joined forces against him, eventually capturing the capital Paris and banishing Napoleon to the island of Elba. He would escape and briefly return to power, but Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo a year later. On April 11, 1968, U.S. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law. One of its major goals was to prevent discrimination against people looking to buy or rent homes. The bill was signed 7 days after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, and racial tensions were running high in many cities across the country. And on this date in 1970, NASA's Apollo 13 mission launched into space, intending to land on the moon. But 2 days later, an oxygen tank exploded, forcing Commander James Lovell to tell Mission Control, "Houston, we've had a problem." The moon mission turned into a rescue mission, and all 3 astronauts were brought home safely on April 17th. Announcing schools on 2 U.S. coasts this Friday. First, from the Sunshine State of Florida, we've got Mr. Concannon, the Lighthouse Award winner of Oasis High School, and the Sharks watching from Cape Coral. From the Pacific Wonderland, it's Mr. Muffler's class that's next. North Valley High School is the home of the Knights in Grants Pass, Oregon. And finally, the Spartans of the Township of Ocean Intermediate School. Mr. Kelsey's class is with us from Oakhurst in the Garden State of New Jersey. What day is it?
April 11th is celebrated as National Barbershop Quartet Day, which harkens back to the 4-part harmonies of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Its spirit lives on in the pitch-perfect a cappella groups of today.
Sweetie.
Word it out. Which of these car parts was invented first? Rear view mirror, gas pedal, dashboard, drum brake. While all of these parts appeared on early cars, the one that dates back to the horse-drawn carriages of the mid-1800s is the dashboard.
Where did the term dashboard come from? Think about the form of transportation that preceded automobiles, horse-drawn carriages. A horse's hooves could kick up a lot of dirt, leaving the people in the wagon behind them in the dust. Well, covered in it anyway. So most carriages were built with a board at the front to block any mud and debris that might be dashed up. Then in the early 1900s, horses were traded out for motors, and dashboards became instrument panels, housing sensors like speedometers and gas gauges. In more recent times, those analog instruments have turned digital. The function of this panel has evolved over the years, but the name hasn't changed. We still call it a dashboard, or sometimes just shortened to dash. Oh, and the word car? It's a shortening of the word carriage. Dr. Claire Straith was a Detroit plastic surgeon who often treated victims of automobile accidents. He advocated for padded dashboards to provide a bit more cushion for drivers if they were to get in an accident. And eventually, padded dashes became widespread. Airbags, which are often housed in the dashboard, were government mandated beginning in 1998. Today, we also have a more modern version of a dashboard, an organized display of data. And to think that comes from this.
When you come from a land down under, you're probably familiar with the Vegemite sandwich. What even the agricultural men at work in Australia might not be familiar with is Vegemite the horse, arriving for a farm show with unmitigated style. Vegemite is performing with other animals at an event expected to attract more than 870,000 people over the next 12 days. The Agricultural Expo brings a sample of rural life to one of Australia's biggest cities. Now, of course, we could talk about the car having horsepower, that it's the main attraction, or that it had people glued to the screen, though some might whinny about that last pun. But while it's too bad the car wasn't a Mustang, Colt, Bronco, Equus, or Pinto, it is saddled with a unique characteristic. Instead of horse-drawn carriage, it's a carriage-drawn horse. And that's exactly the kind of horseplay we love on The World from A to Z. I'm Carl Azus, and you mean the world to me.
We are trying to get out.